Welcome into another edition of Inside Carolina's Scouting Reports or UNC Football Scouting Reports. The man in the middle or the man on the side of your screen, Jason Staples. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley. That's Jason, of course. This is the Running Back Scouting Reports. We're going to start with Omarion Hampton. Jason, we were talking off air. This is a young man who is built like a tank, has good size, has zero body fat, it appears. If he can figure it out from the running back position, North Carolina seems to be pretty good there.
Yeah, and you can say that about a lot of the guys on the roster. If he can just figure it out this year and become that guy, then boy, the sky's the limit. They've got bodies in the in this running back room to really have a high ceiling. And Hampton is maybe the best example of that. He's a guy that 220 pounds, and there's nothing to cut from that 220 pounds at 6 foot 220, and just has muscles on muscles. It just that kind of player, and then adds to that. He ran 10.7 in the 100 meters in high school. That's moving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So has some real breakaway speed. I mean, he can run and hide when he gets in the open field. I don't think he showed quite as much speed in pads last year as you would expect from a guy that's 10.7. Didn't quite have the as much football speed and the long speed as you would hope from that, but still looked fast. So, you combine all that, and physically speaking, when it comes to running fast in a straight line and being able to lift a lot of weight and run over guys, he has the goods. Thing is, running back is about more than that. And last year he struggled some with some of those other things, and especially with vision. And vision might be the single most important thing for a running back. You see guys that are, a little smaller than average, maybe not the fastest guy in the world, but they have elite vision, and those guys can be good backs despite those other things. And then every so often you see these guys that are, big and strong and super fast and just can't put it all together. Vision is the most important thing. And last year, that was a bit of an issue for Omarion. If he can fix that this year, then he's one of the two guys that's getting the most carries, I think. But there were times last year where it looked like he was running with his eyes closed. Mm-hmm. And that's something that he's going to have to deal with. And part of that, I think, is that he does a really good job of running with a low pad level. But there are times where he's running, he's I think trying to keep his pads so low that he actually gets his head too low to be able to actually see well. He's going to have to sync up his eyes and his feet and run in a good position so that he can actually see, and do that with some patience. So the other thing that he would do last year is he'd get the ball and he'd already be going 80 miles an hour into the, kind of direction that he's supposed to go. Okay, the hole's going to be here, or it should be here. And then it turned out the hole wasn't quite there. It's over, just over here, a yard or half a yard, but he's already going so fast here that he couldn't hit the hole, the correct hole, with the kind of burst that you want. If he can slow himself down a little bit when he first gets the football, so that he can actually sync up his feet and his eyes and time it so that he goes from 30 or 40 miles an hour to 90 in that moment, as soon as he sees the crease, now you're looking at a player who can actually get it done as a back. That's something that can be a little hard to learn. I mean, like, slow down to be fast, right? It's so counterintuitive, but that's what you have to do as a running back, is you have to be patient enough to be able to see it all develop, and to do that with your feet in just the right spot, so that as soon as you see it, your feet are already in position to be able to make that cut and go. I mean, Javonte Williams was the guy who was one of the best at this. You could see this with him. You go back and you watch him, and he's got the ball in the backfield. He's going, picking along just a little bit, and then boom, accelerates through a hole that you didn't even see was there, but he could tell it was about to open. That's what Hampton needs to get to. If he can learn to do that and not be as much of a one-speed runner where you get the ball and it's 100 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour into the back of his offensive lineman. Okay, well, slow down a little bit, young buck, and see if you can pick through and find that hole. All of a sudden, he's a guy that can be more threatening. The other thing that was a little bit disappointing with him last year is, given his physique and his physical traits, only 15 missed tackle. He only forced 15 missed tackles on 89 carries last year. So, and you add that to 5 catches as well. He forced a missed tackle on only 15% of his touches last year.
Surprising.
If you're that dude, your job is to force guys to miss tackles. And you'll hear me say this over and over again about running backs. The running backs, they've got several jobs. First job is pass protection. You make sure your quarterback doesn't get killed in pass protection. None of the running backs were great in pass blocking last year. Hampton was a true freshman. Who came in, who was not an early enrollee. You kind of expect him to struggle a little bit there. But number one is that. You could say that's sort of 1A or 1B. The other one is, don't put the ball on the ground. Don't fumble. Hampton had 2 last year, and a couple big ones. So don't put the ball on the ground. Don't get your quarterback killed. Those are the first 2 things at the running back position. After that, the next most important thing is, your job is to let the offensive line get you to a certain spot, and then you have to win one-on-ones. The offensive line's job, the offensive coordinator's job, is to set you up with one-on-ones against a guy at the second level. And your job is to win that matchup. And running backs who don't win that matchup are guys that don't play. It's as simple as that. And last year, 15% of touches, he forced a missed tackle. And had 2.37 yards per contact, or yards after contact. That's what has to improve. Now, a lot of that has to do with not putting himself in position to be accelerating through the hole into those one-on-one matchups where he's got a two-way go and can use that physical capacity that he has to break a tackle. If you're not in position to break the tackle, you're not going to do it. So that's what he's got to do. All the potential in the world. Now it's just a matter of, can he put it together as a developed player to take advantage of those traits.
Yeah, I think a lot of times what he was able to do in high school is just plow people, and you can't do it in college as much. Hampton certainly has the ability, certainly has the body to get all that done. Let's move on down the list. George Pettaway, guy that came in with Hampton. A lot of people, rightfully so, want to see him get a lot of touches, want to see him be a part of that backfield. Certainly a different type back than Hampton. Jason, what did you see from George Pettaway on his relatively limited snaps last season, and then he was injured a lot of the spring?
So George is a smaller back, and they list him at 195, but when you look at him out there, he does not look 195. So maybe he is, and just carries it really well. But the thing that stands out to you as soon as he gets his hands on the ball is the burst. He really has, I would say, outstanding burst. Very quick, and I think he did flash some good vision at times. The issue for him was just that with his frame and overall lack of body mass and a little bit of strength, he was a guy that just sort of went down or got slowed down too easily if a guy got a hand on him. But he's a guy that in space, you get him that one-on-one matchup, and he's going to win it most of the time. So Pro Football Focus has an elusiveness rating that they put together on the basis of missed tackles forced and yards after contact and a variety of other things. And, on 26 carries last year, his elusiveness rating was 126.4. Anything over 100 is good. So That's encouraging. That's a solid thing. Now, for what it's worth, Hampton, and I'm sure some are wondering right now, Hampton was at 42.9.
Wow.
Right. So, if you were gonna guess based on last year, which of these guys is going to be a little higher on the chart this year, I would guess Petaway, just because you're looking at a guy that overall was able to force more missed tackles per rush, got a little bit higher yards after contact. 3.95 yards after contact is not bad. So some positives, but again, most of Petaway's reps were against the lower level competition early in the year. He had a couple big runs against FAMU. The question is he going to be strong enough and consistent enough at the ACC level to be in that top 2 this year? He's got to get stronger. He's got to get thicker through the waist or thicker through the hips, that is, so that he's not going to get slowed down when a guy gets a hand on him. But one of the practices that I went to this spring, I watched him burst and just take off for about 50 yards, and it was one of those, like, on field, you're like, okay, that kid can run. And that's one of the things that, look, if you can make big plays from the running back position like that, just because you see the seam and you hit it and you make that linebacker miss and then you're gone, those guys find ways to get on the field eventually. And I think he's going to have some chances to get there. He also, he was a really good receiver in high school. He had a couple drops as a receiver, 5 catches and 2 drops last year, and the drops were bad. But if he can be consistent catching the football as well, I think he could have a role as a third down guy for Carolina at least. And that's kind of what I would project him as this year. Is he would be the guy that I would probably pick out of this group to be my third down back if I had a third down back.
Indeed, George Petaway, and availability. You guys stay healthy. Another guy, going out of order a little bit, another guy that availability has been an issue, but talent and skill is not, and that's Caleb Hood. Jason, we saw him against App State make some plays. He got hurt on a long run there and sort of stayed dinged up most of the rest of the year. And then I think he got dinged a little bit in spring. But anyway, he is a guy whose health is an issue, quite frankly. What did they say back in the day? The best ability is availability. Hood has struggled with it, but break down his talent and skill set for this North Carolina team.
Yeah, you think about this. He got injured and missed pretty much all of his freshman season, or almost all of it. He missed most of his sophomore season. Then he missed both springs.
Not good.
Yeah, he's been in the he spent more time in the training room than he has on the field. So that's the problem. Now, the plus is he's the biggest back. He's 230. Has a high 30s vertical. So you look at the explosiveness that's there, and excellent contact balance. One of those guys that shows the ability, shows that he can break tackles. Although again, same thing with Hood as with Omarion Hampton. Last year on 44 carries, 5 missed tackles forced. Like, come on, guys. That's your job. You got to force missed tackles. You've got to, yards after contact, 2.84. That should be north of 3. You'd like it to be north of even that, but he's at the same time, he's a guy that has, I think, of this whole group, Hood has probably on the field, maybe with the exception of British Brooks, has shown the most intriguing sort of combination of vision, frame, speed, quickness, all of that. Because there were times where, you could see Hood, the light bulb starting to go on. And you saw that again against App State last year. You saw that against Virginia Tech last year, where it's like, okay, he's just now it's starting to come on. Like, this guy has enough talent that you can see it. It's happening. And then the next thing you know, he goes down and he's hurt. Man, come on. So, he's another guy that should be able to put himself in position to be one of those 2 top guys. I mean, they want to have 2 guys that get the bulk of the carries. If Caleb Hood is healthy all season, I would bank on him probably being one of those two guys based on what we've seen so far. But what do you think the odds of Caleb Hood being healthy all season are? So far, those odds look real small.
Yeah, it's definitely a valid point.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I think he's got good natural vision. He started to get his eyes and his feet synced up nicely last year. He is able to run with a little bit of a change of speed from when he gets the ball to when he bursts through. So that's good. I would really like to see him improve his hip. This is really nitpicking, but I'd like to see him improve his hip flexor strength because just when you look at his gait when he's running, I'd like to see him work through getting a little bit more. He shuffles a little bit as a runner. I'd like to see him get those knees up a little bit once he actually finds space, and I think he'd be a little bit more explosive if he did that. So that's one of those things that, as a strength and conditioning type thing, that's what I would be supplementing some of what he does with a number of the hip flexor strength and explosion auxiliaries to help him on that. But really for him, it's, running backs with shoulder problems wind up having a lot of problems. They have trouble staying on the field, and he's had shoulder injuries now 2 years straight. So, the right decision was made in the spring. Keep him off the field, keep him from getting any contact during the spring. Hopefully that shoulder can hold up after getting enough rest and rehab. But that's really, for me, the thing that needs to happen is he needs to be healthy. And if he does, I think he's one of the two guys that gets the most carries.
Yep, he can play, and he was one of our Players Lounge guests earlier in the summer. If you haven't checked it out, go check it out at Inside Carolina YouTube channel. Moving on down the line, we'll go Elijah Green. He sort of stepped up and took over the running back room late in the season. It's a guy who I thought may be in the portal at some point, but really showed his worth for North Carolina the last half of the season. Jason, you've got him ranked or reviewed, and then you have his potential. What do you see from the young Mr. Green?
Yeah, this is a guy who I think has one of the smallest gaps between floor and ceiling at this point. You know who he is. He's played enough. He had 131 carries last year and through the meat of the schedule. So you kind of know what he is. You know who he is. And I think one of the things that you find with him is a guy that he's found a way to keep himself on the field when other guys couldn't last year. Ultimately, he was one of the last guys standing last year as a guy that was consistent enough to be on the field, was healthy enough to be on the field, and was reliable enough in the things that they asked him to do to be a solid player. But I think that's basically what you're getting with him, is a solid player. Now he's got legitimate long speed. If he gets into the open field with a clear lane and it's a 100-meter race against, one of the guys in the secondary, he's going to win that more often than not. I think he can really run on straight lines. The issue for him is that he's not a guy that has a ton of wiggle. You have to open up that straight lane. And again, here's the refrain from, there's been some consistent stuff across different position groups so far. 131 carries, 23 tackles, 23 missed tackles forced, 2.76 yards after contact. Elusiveness grade from Pro Football Focus, 46.5. You got to make the first guy miss more often. You got to break more tackles at the second level to be that guy. Now, can he be a good player? Can you win with him at running back? Yes. 4.3 yards per carry. Okay. Get a few breakaway touchdowns where he does have that lane. Sure. But you got to win more one-on-one battles. You've got to get more out of each carry when you have an opportunity to win one-on-one. And the other thing is, pass protection wise, he whiffed on some pretty bad ones last year. And for an older player, he's got to do a better job in pass protection. That's one of those things. As a veteran, if you're going to differentiate yourself from the more talented young guys behind you, you better be perfect. You better clean up every single thing in pass protection and some of those things. And there were some mistakes last year that cost him a sack or two, for example. I'm thinking of one in particular against NC State that was a big deal, and you can't miss those. And so that's kind of where he is. But I think he's a quality player with a high floor. It's just a matter of, can he find more ceiling to hold off some of the younger talent?
Yeah, and he had a long run call back against Georgia Tech there that maybe changes the outcome of that game. But that is Elijah Green, last name on the list, British Brooks. Jason, British Brooks is has rapidly become a legend on the Inside Carolina message boards for his performance against NC State in Raleigh a couple years ago, and then he had a good run against South Carolina as well. Hurt last year in the spring, quite frankly, and I'm no doctor. I was shocked that he did not have a sleeve on his leg when we saw him in the open practice. Your take on British? He is certainly the veteran of the bunch.
He's the one guy of this group who has proven himself against top competition to be able to be more than average so far. All of these guys have the capacity to be more than that. He's the one guy who's done it at this point. Now, he's only done it over, he had 24 carries in 2020 and 31 in 2021. Most of those in 2020 were garbage time. So he's only got 31 carries in any sort of lead role, and did a lot with those 31 carries in 2021, that, enough to get you to go, okay, wow, this guy's really, really got it. But that's a really small sample size, right? So can he do it over the course of a whole season? We don't know, but we know against NC State, we know that he's done it against top competition, or at least against, rivalry competition. Perhaps I wouldn't necessarily say NC State is top competition, but he's done it at the ACC level to play really well. You look at those 31 carries, he forced 18 missed tackles on 31 carries in 2020.
Now we're talking.
Yeah, now we're talking, right? Yards after contact, 4.35. Okay. Like, those are numbers, you put that over the course of a season and you're looking at elite numbers. Elusiveness rating from Pro Football Focus, 252.9 in those 31 carries. Right? Now that's going to come down over the course of a whole season. I mean, it's really rare you're going to get above 200. But that's what he put up, and that's why he kind of became a message board legend. And I do wonder what they would have looked like with him in the backfield last year. But if that's the level of play you're getting from him consistently over the course of the season, now you're talking about a guy that's, in the running for all ACC teams. So, that's the question. Now, the thing is, he looked like a completely different player in those carries late in 2021 than he had in prior seasons. And that was one of the questions at the end of the season. You remember, we were all asking, like, man, why didn't he get more carries earlier in the year? My goodness, what happened? It's because he had not shown that in prior years. You look at his carries against Texas A&M in the bowl game in 2020, and he didn't win at the second level at that rate. So somehow the light bulb clicked on, and he was able to do what he needed there. But again, 65 career carries in 5 seasons. But he's won a lot of one-on-one battles through those particular carries, and he does have that thick, muscular build. I mean, he's not as tall as Omarion Hampton. Hampton's 6 foot 220 or so. British Brooks, though, is listed at 5'10 and a half, 226. I mean, he's a brick house. I mean, he is really put together, and plays with the leverage that you would expect from that, and does break a lot of tackles at the second level. If he's anywhere near the player that he looked like at the end of 2021, there's your number one running back for this season. I don't think there's any question about that. But you're looking at a guy that's 1 year removed from a major knee injury. So, I mean, that's the question. We don't know what you're going to get there. There are a lot of questions there. But and the other thing is, he's a guy that's more bursty than long speed. I mean, he's, I have him as a kind of a high 4.5 guy. He's not a guy that is going to run away every time he's in the secondary. You're going to get a lot of, 20, 30, yard type runs when he wins at the second level rather than 60, 70-yard runs. A run that, say George Petaway or Elijah Green might take to the house because they'll outrun the secondary. Brooks may get 30 or 40 on. That's a difference. The other difference, though, is whereas those guys might get stopped for 5 yards on another run or get stopped for 2 yards, Brooks may, with his vision and some of those other things, breaking that tackle at that next level, may get 15. So, that's kind of what you're trading out. But I see him, if he is anywhere near healthy and anywhere near the level that he was in 2021, he's your primary running back. I think he gets 130 to 180 carries and should be productive. Again, the only question is can he handle the workload once he's healthy and playing at that level? Can he put those numbers up over a longer season? But to me, he has to start at the number one spot.
Interesting take there. We have gone player by player. Jason Staples discussing the North Carolina running backs. A stacked room. A lot of talent in the room, Jason. Overall assessment, I think North Carolina needs to be better here, clearly better than they were last year. What's your overall take on this spot for North Carolina, Chip Lindsey's offense?
Well, I mean, it's a room that has 5 guys, and you're adding a 6th in recruiting that we didn't even talk about. But it's got 5 guys with at least a year in the program who have ACC level bodies. The question is, do you have a single guy in that room that is a top level player? Not a top level body. I mean, I think you look, like you pointed out, you look at, Omarion Hampton, and he's going to win the underwear Olympics when he goes to the, if he gets asked to go to the NFL Combine, they're going to love him the way he looks. But I'm talking about in pads, actual performance. You got 5 guys. Can you find 1 or 2 of them that are going to play at a very good, not an average, not a slightly above average, but at a very good level in the ACC? So far, of those 5 guys, not one of them has managed to sustain that for over 2 games. And the only one of them that's done that did it for 2 games and then got hurt. So to me, right now, if you were assessing this room, I would say it's a whole lot of average with the possibility of a whole lot more than average. The difference between the floor and the ceiling in the running back room is really high, because you have guys that have traits that you go, man, if he's got this, and this, but if he can just add this, all of a sudden now you got something going. With Caleb Hood, it's availability. With, Elijah Green, it's a little wiggle. With George Petaway, it's getting stronger. With Omarion Hampton, it's growing a pair of eyes. With British Brooks, it's being healthy. All of these guys have one thing that seems to be kind of holding them back. If any of them get that one thing kind of taken care of, now you've got a top-level ACC back. Is it going to happen? You hope so. You got enough bodies that, you're banking on it. And if I were a betting man, I would bet on at least one of them kind of getting there. But who's going to do it? And it's going to be a hard thing to kind of shake out during camp. But they're going to have to figure that out, and they're going to have to find a way to get better play overall out of this room.
That is Jason Staples. This has been UNC Football Scouting Reports. Of course, find Jason's work on Tar Pit Premium message boards. It is ongoing. It will go most of July. We'll be back to talk tight ends and wide receivers, and then quarterbacks. That's Jason. I'm Tommy. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Thanks, folks. We'll see you again soon.